Here in Zimbabwe, we've got amazing people that do amazing things with the judiciary system, with anti-poaching, and we have to have all of that in place, of course, otherwise we're really in big trouble. But at the same time, we need to address the cause because we're fighting a never-ending battle. And I was talking to my dad about it the other day, and we're talking about individual animals and doing this and protecting habitat, and it's no longer enough to protect habitat, we have to regenerate it.
Welcome to the Wise Traditions Podcast, sponsored by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
I'm your host, Hilda Labrada Gore. This is episode 85, and my guest is Allan Savory. Sarah's passion is taking care of the earth through holistic management. She inherited this enduring love of animals and storytelling from her father, Allan Savory. He is a world-renowned ecologist who developed the concept of holistic management. And she inherited it also from her grandmother, Margaret Barnes, who was the first Rhodesian woman to attend Oxford University, where she was tutored by the famous author C.S. Lewis. Can you imagine? A useful mix of genes for writing children's books about conservation issues. This is what Sarah does. And in today's interview, she explains in simple terms what it means to make choices that are good for us, our children, and the planet. She's also a mother of two, so she knows how to explain the threats to our planet in a clear, straightforward manner. You are going to love our conversation. Before we dig in, we want to thank our sponsors. Wise Traditions is supported in part by New Trends Publishing. New Trends Publishing is the home of nourishing traditions and other amazing books on diet and health. Check them out at newtrendspublishing.com. And the Weston A. Price Foundation. Their famous Wise Traditions Conference is coming up. It is great for friends and foodies alike. It will be held in Minneapolis, Minnesota in November, the 10th through the 13th. There's nothing like learning from new friends, hanging out with the experts and speakers, and just having an all-around good time. So come on out and take your health to new heights. Go to wisetraditions.org for more information. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here.
We are sitting here in Harare, Zimbabwe, and it's a gorgeous day. I'm so thankful that we're together. And I actually want to start asking you, Sarah, about Zimbabwe. What are the struggles they're having with their land here?
Well, we've had a very volatile political situation for a lot of years, so there are huge issues with land in terms of great amounts of poverty and people poaching and things like that. A lot of people lost their farm.
Well, we're sitting in this little Queen of Hearts place, and the grass looks so green, but all of Zim doesn't look like this, right, Sarah?
No, we have a lot of land that has desertified due to mismanagement of livestock. We have a lot of communal areas with livestock that are mismanaged, and we have a lot of areas that have desertified due to mismanagement of wildlife as well, which we'll get onto just now and explain a little bit more why we have that.
Yes, because I know we have these same issues, and the whole world is experiencing these issues of desertification, but I don't quite get what you mean by mismanagement. How are we mismanaging the livestock and the animals?
Well, naturally, all the world's grassland developed with huge herds of grazing animals and their pack hunting predators. And now we don't manage animals correctly, so they are spread out and not grazing naturally and things like that. So rather than benefiting the land and doing good, they're either overgrazing or overresting, and grass dies from both of those things.
Overgrazing or overresting?
Yeah, so grasslands have to develop with hooved animals and their pack hunting predators, keeping them moving with the correct timing and bunched together. So as soon as you take away that natural movement, you either get overresting of plants where you don't have enough animals on the land, or you have overgrazing of plants where animals stay too long in a particular area, and both cause desertification.
And I hear here in Zim, they also say, for example, maybe it's just too many animals, too many elephants, too many of something that's messing things up. But you don't agree with that, do you?
No, it's all due to desertification, because as soon as you don't have the food and whatever the animals need, they start behaving unnaturally. And so animals will adapt if they, for example, I'll use elephants as an example of that. If elephants are naturally they are predominantly grazers, but most people today will think that they're predominantly browsers, because through desertification they've lost the grazing, so they've turned and they're putting a lot of pressure on trees. So they start browsing and putting pressure on trees. So here in Zimbabwe, we're losing our very beautiful Masasa trees and hardwood like Mapani trees due to elephants, but it's because they don't have the grazing. So if we regenerated habitat and they had the grazing that they require, they would take the pressure off the trees because they would go back to grazing.
Let's get to that. Like, how do we regenerate the soil? How does that happen?
Well, again, it's with the natural hoof movement and these big herds of animals, which unfortunately, due to man's mismanagement, and we've lost huge amounts of game and antelope that the plains and the grasslands developed with. So now it's desertified.
So desertification is the problem, not too many animals. So how can the land be regenerated so that we reverse desertification?
Okay, so there's a concept called holistic management, which uses livestock as a proxy to mimic the herds that we don't have anymore. So they are herded to mimic those big herds that would naturally be herded and moved with pack hunting predators. So it just mimics that movement because you need the hoof action, and the grasslands they have to decay biologically. If they are left, they oxidize and turn to chemical oxidation, and then they die. And that's when traditionally people have burnt grasslands, and burning is a terrible, terrible thing. So yeah, they have to decay with the hoof movement. So what happens is the animals trample the grass down and they dung and urinate on it, and they move through, and then that covers the soil, and then it decays biologically.
And have you seen this happen?
Yes, I've seen this happen for many years on a place called the Africa Centre for Holistic Management here in Victoria Falls, where we've used the livestock to regenerate the land. It's just incredible results, and the grasses grow thicker and thicker every year. Different grasses come back every year. We've got perennials come back. And the first perennials that come back, it's very interesting because they are fire dependent. The grasses that come back first, because we've been burning for so many years. So things like that are very interesting, but it's a very long topic.
But you have photographs that show that when you use animals, what did you call it before? Something hooves? Harnessing hooves. When you harness the hooves, it really causes this growth, and it looks like it used to look.
Yeah, it's just incredible how it works, and nature will bring back, even if it's land that has really desertified past the point of you ever thinking it will be okay again. Even land reclamation sites get regenerated.
Now, Sarah, some people think, well, if we just plant enough trees to replace the ones that were lost, we'll be okay. Is that regenerative?
No, not at all. And people spend billions and billions of dollars planting trees, but they haven't addressed the cause of why they lost the trees in the first place. So if trees are being lost due to animals hammering them or desertification, they're still not addressing why they've lost the trees in the first place.
So it's like they're going to be stuck in this cycle of having to continually replace the trees unless they can get down to the root issue.
Yeah, it's just a simple thing of that's not the cause. The loss of trees is because of desertification, and they're not and animals behaving unnaturally, and they're not addressing those issues. So if you plant trees, you're just going to end up with the same issue again unless you address the root cause of it.
I love that you're getting down to the root cause. I'm thinking of what you said when you said animals behaving unnaturally. I feel like people fall into that category as well, don't they? When they become economically desperate, they're going to behave unnaturally and do something that's not good for other people. They may resort to violence or crime or theft, poaching, right? So we really need to get down to the root so that all of us can live in harmony.
Yeah, of course. Poverty is a huge cause of problems, and worldwide we have terrorism, we have all sorts of things which are all root causes of poverty and hunger and no shelter, which again, holistic management and regenerating land addresses all of these root causes. So here in Zimbabwe, we have horrific poaching because we have over 95% unemployment. So these guys are starving, and if somebody comes along and offers them some money to poach an animal and they get to feed their family, it's, of course they're going to do it. They're starving.
So my question is, for those of us who are not in a desperate situation, we also don't have cattle or elephants to manage or anything, how can we be a part of this movement to regenerate the land?
Well, I always say you make a decision every time you go into a shop with what you buy. So if you support regenerative clothing, regenerative meat, regenerative agriculture, anything that's farmed using regenerative and holistic practices where you are looking after the environment rather than damaging it, and working with the environment rather than damaging it, and not supporting. So the cotton industry, for example, they grow huge amounts of cotton, and they use pesticides and they use chemicals and things like that. So even your clothing, you're supporting an industry. But there are industries that are starting now with regenerative clothes and things like that. So it's just labels and things like that. And I know it's probably more expensive initially to buy those sort of things, but the more people that do it, the cheaper it will be able to become. And support local farmers, locally grown, holistically managed beef, holistically managed livestock is healthy, it's happy. They don't get fed, they don't get pumped full of antibiotics, they don't get crops grown for them. You don't have to grow a single crop for them. They're not housed in these horrific conditions in those concentrated animal feedlots. Don't buy meat that comes from those places, and you can make a difference.
When you were talking about not buying this clothing that's full of pesticides or that's not grown organically or humanely, it made me think maybe we should just opt out of clothing altogether.
You can, if you like.
I've got to find a new place to live. No, I'm only kidding. But you know what I like, Sarah, is that you're really simplifying some of these concepts for me, because it can be difficult to wrap your head around the concept of holistic management, can't it?
Yeah, it can be very, very difficult, but I think it's because for years and years, humans have been taught that these are the correct management ways and these are the correct ways, and it's very hard to unlearn something that you've been taught for years and years. But if you think about it, it's going back to what nature does, and nature's got everything figured out, and we've come along with our egos and decided that we can sort of play God, and it's not working. Obviously.
Yep. And I think our listeners may be taking initial steps toward changing their diet. They may come to Wise Traditions from that perspective, like, oh, I want to get healthier, so I'm going to change my diet. And then one thing leads them to the next. And you're right, there is a kind of logical progression. If you think, I want the best food, it's going to come from the most natural setting. How can I make sure the animals are taken care of? And then where are the animals eating? It's all connected.
Yeah, it's absolutely all connected. And when I was about 2 years old, I used to go around the garden and collect snails so that my mum didn't stand on them, and I'd go and release them in a field nearby. So I won't eat any animals that have been brought up cruelly, but I don't believe we should be vegetarians at all. We are designed to eat meat. I think people eat too much meat. I don't think we're designed to eat as much meat as we do consume now, but also the meat we eat is not healthy at all if it's been farmed in those conditions. But I will only eat stuff that's holistically managed and actually healthy for you, and that the animals haven't been brought up cruelly.
Coming up, Sarah tells us about her new book and how it can be used to help us all think differently about how to save animals and our planet. We want to pause now and thank our sponsors, the Weston A. Price Foundation. Come on out to their Wise Traditions Conference held in Minneapolis this November. Great speakers will be there as usual, and of course there's awesome food. Sally is even offering a master cooking class. You just don't want to miss this. So come join us. If you're on a budget, there are special rates for just a day, a weekend, and even no meal options if you just want to go on your own with that. Do what you need to do to save money, but please join us. There's even an early bird price, so look into it. Go to wisetraditions.com. Hey, and have you seen the Nourishing Traditions cookbook for children? I love it. It takes that big, nourishing traditions tome and kind of boils it down to simple, easy to grasp recipes and helps for cooking in the kitchen. So the kids in your family are going to love it, and so will the adults. They'll learn to make everything from crispy nuts to friendly ferments. It's available at bookstores, online booksellers, and of course at newtrendspublishing.com. And if you decide to go big, keep in mind that case orders are 50% off at newtrendspublishing.com. Now, I want to go to your book now. You're a children's book author. Your first book was called What on Earth Is That? So I have to ask you, what on earth is that about?
I started writing that book because pangolins are one of my favorite animals in the whole world, and very, very few people even know what a pangolin is. And they are the most trafficked mammal in the world. So I wrote that book, and it turned out to be a huge success, much bigger than I ever expected. And I thought the best way to get through to people is if I wrote a children's book, and then parents also learn because they read to their children. So that's how my book writing started.
So it was about pangolins and how holistic management of the earth can save them?
The first one was just about pangolins as an individual species. And then the more I was involved with that book, the more I realized that it doesn't matter how many individual species we save, because if we don't regenerate their habitat, we're going to lose everything anyway. So that's what started me on my next book.
Tell us a story about when you were a child and how you wanted to save one little pig.
Well, when I was little, I was with my dad at our farm in Victoria Falls, and there was a sick pig, and I wanted to take care of it. And my dad said to the guys, no, you just got to kill it, because otherwise it'll make all the other pigs sick. So I got very upset, and my dad said, you have to look at the bigger picture. And I said, no, you can continue looking at the bigger picture. I'm going to save the little guys. And I've finally come around to knowing that the only way to save the little guys is to look at the bigger picture.
And so that's exactly what you did with your second book.
Yes, so my second book, I decided to focus on holistic management and draw people's attention a little bit away from big iconic species and try to focus more on smaller species and the soil, and show everybody how important the whole picture is.
So what's wrong with just saving one group of animals? Let's say I'm all about saving the rhinos. What's wrong with that? It's not going to achieve the desired effect?
No, not at all. If rhinos or elephants or pangolins or whatever iconic species you're donating money to or trying to save, if they don't have anything to eat, they're going to die anyway.
So that's why you say we have to get back to the soil.
Yeah, we absolutely have to, because also desertification, which is happening worldwide, is also creating terrible, terrible, ineffective rainfall, where we have many more droughts, we have many more floods, we have less water because the water just runs off. Whereas if it's regenerated and it's how it should be, with all the grass and the roots and everything natural, then the rainwater is effective because it's held in the ground. You have rivers flowing all year round, things like that. So that's another whole other hours and hours of talking, but yeah, it's simple, but it's hard to get people to try to grasp it.
That's why I'm glad you wrote the children's book, because as you said, it's not just for the children, it's for the adults that read it.
Yes, absolutely. I don't think a children's book is good unless an adult wants to read it.
So ineffective rainfall. So we think, oh good, it's raining, this is going to help the land. But if there isn't the roots and the grass system to hold on to the rain and let it sink deep into the soil, it won't regenerate the soil, it just washes it off.
Yeah, so basically if you think of pouring some water onto a dry piece of land, it's just going to run off and it's going to be dry in an hour, less than an hour. But if you think of pouring water onto a very lush, grassy piece of soil, it's going to hold it, and it's going to be wet under that grass for a long, long time. So that's a simple way of giving that example.
Can you tell me a story of some way in which this is playing out?
Well, for example, the other day I saw a post on Facebook of some well-known wildlife conservation area, and they had a picture of an elephant and a rhino, and they were feeding them lucerne, which is just like a crop. And their post was that they had to grow crops to feed their wildlife because they had no grazing because of the terrible drought that they were having. So I wrote and said, you don't have no grazing because there's a drought. You have drought because there's no grazing, because it's ineffective rainfall.
That is mind-blowing.
Yeah, it is, but it's so simple, but people don't get it, and they say, and their reply to me was, we've been managing this land for over 50 years, and we know what we're doing, and they just think that drought is just something that happens.
And so here they were feeding wildlife stuff that they had grown. That really seems like an oxymoron. And it's like they're domesticating them, and that's not a good thing either. That's out of balance, isn't it?
Yeah, so everything is just topsy-turvy. Like I said, things will just end up in zoos or stuff like that if we don't start letting our animals behave naturally. And where you regenerate habitat, for example, the place in Vic Falls, that we have an abundance of wildlife because they're attracted to the area, because they have shelter, they have food, they have water all year round, and it's just incredible.
I was there last year and I saw buffalo crossing the road, the little path that we had the Jeep on, and I saw more wildlife there than I had in some national park.
Yeah, it's just incredible. They really are attracted to the place. The reason in rainy season you'll see animals in the national park is they have no cover. So that's quite an interesting fact to mention. So at Dibangombe in the rainy season you see very little because they've got the shelter and the cover that they need. You shouldn't, if an animal wants to hide, it should be allowed to hide, and we shouldn't, I feel very much like give them respect and let them be able to hide. I don't like these places where you go and you just see them all over the place and they've lost their natural sort of fear and natural behavior. I think they should be able to hide if they want to hide, and, you're just lucky if you see them.
But Sarah, you're not simply concerned with what's happening in Zimbabwe. You're part of a whole movement, aren't you?
Yeah, this is absolutely a worldwide issue. And look at a good example is the plains in the States, which had millions and millions of bison migrating every year, and they don't have that, and they're all desertifying because they do not have those hooves across them that they should have, and the predators that they should have. For a good example is when they put the wolves back in Yellowstone National Park, it all started regenerating, but simply because it redressed the balance of the antelope and elk and stuff behaving naturally again.
So the tide is turning, do you think?
I really hope so. I think with social media, we can move away from these reductionist management thinking and start taking things more into control in our own hands and doing stuff as individuals rather than following the crowd like sheep, And
so you were saying even those of us that don't live in a place where we manage animals and so forth, or on a farm, we can still make choices that are helping the bigger picture.
Absolutely. One of my most hated things in the whole world are those terrible, terrible concentrated animal feedlots where they just factory farm animals and they pump them full of antibiotics, and it's just horrific. You're keeping huge pharmaceutical companies in business, chemicals, all of those big companies, which that's what they want. And agricultural, they're growing huge amounts of crops. Whereas with holistically managed livestock, you do not have to do any of that. You don't have to grow anything. They will regenerate habitat. They will have their own grazing. They will be healthy. We will be healthier for it. And the climate will be healthier. And it's just a knock-on effect with everything.
Because Sarah, that some people are saying we simply need to reduce the number of animals to avoid climate change. That would mean eating less meat. What do you think of that?
You need to reduce the number of animals in factory farm situations because then, which will reduce the amount of crops that are grown for them, which is hugely environmentally damaging. And you have to put them back on the grasslands where they will regenerate the grasslands.
So I love the title of your book, That's How We Roll, because as we've been saying, I feel like we're gaining momentum and we're rolling in the right direction. Tell us more about the premise of the book.
Okay, so I called it That's How We Roll for that reason, and I called it That's How We Roll because it's about a pangolin and a dung beetle, and dung beetles roll dung into balls and roll it, and pangolins roll into balls when they're scared and when they sleep. It's just a story about a dung beetle and a pangolin who set off on a journey to find better land because the land where they live has desertified and they're going to die if they stay there. So they set off on this journey and they end up finding a holistically managed place which has abundant water and grass. And other animals and other dung beetles and pangolins. All my books will have fact and photo pages at the end, so examples of where land has been holistically managed in this one, and facts about a few of the little animals in the book. And I'm trying to bring attention to the smaller creatures like the dung beetles, which are absolutely essential and just as important as an elephant in the bigger picture. So every single animal has its role, and the soil is the most important thing. It supports all life. And I'll tell you a very interesting thing that I heard the other day is that in one handful of healthy soil, there are more microorganisms than there are people on the planet.
You're kidding me.
No, it's just incredible.
That is incredible. And I like that you're drawing our attention down to the soil. I just feel like there's never going to be a movement to like save the dung beetle, though I feel kind of sorry for it.
Well, the dung beetle's just a symbol of the little guys that everybody's ignoring. And just instead of focusing on individual species, we need to focus on entire ecosystems, because an ecosystem is absolutely sustaining. It knows what it's doing. And if everything is in balance, it's perfect. And as soon as we start taking things out and we start messing with the balance, and things adjust. And it's getting to the point now where things cannot adjust anymore, and we're seeing entire ecosystems collapsing because we've messed it with it to the point of almost no return. So we need to move on this as quickly as we can.
And didn't you say before we got on air something about everyone has their piece of the puzzle? Can you explain that a little bit?
I often describe it where there's a lot of people working to save individual species, or saying, we're going to support rhinos or elephants. I often say it's like everybody's holding on to a piece of the puzzle. And while they do incredible work for those species, you need to put in place and work together and put all your pieces of the puzzle together and start to regenerate habitat. Like, for example, here in Zimbabwe, we've got amazing people that do amazing things with the judiciary system, with anti-poaching, and we have to have all of that in place, of course, otherwise we're really in big trouble. But at the same time, we need to address the cause, because we're fighting a never-ending battle. And I was talking to my dad about it the other day, and we're talking about individual animals and doing this and protecting habitat, and it's no longer enough to protect habitat. We have to regenerate it. And my dad, it really scared me, because he said to me, I've been having this conversation for 60 years and it's getting worse.
We no longer have to simply protect the habitat. We need to regenerate it. Well, those are powerful words. Sarah, as we begin to wrap up, I often ask this question of my guests at the end of the program. I wonder if it applies. Perhaps it will. But I often say, if the listener could only do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do? I
would say exactly what I've been talking about, is buy stuff that isn't full of pesticides and GMOs, and go back to as natural as you can.
That's a good word. Thank you so much for your time today, Sarah. I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
My guest today was Sarah Savory. For more on what she's doing, go to her Facebook page, Sarah J. Savory. And for links to her crowdfunding, for her latest children's book and other such things, visit the WestonAPrice.org website, go to the podcast page, and look to the show notes for episode 85, where we will have links for all of the above. Hey, and for those who are still listening, don't forget to look for me in California this summer. I'm going to be in San Diego on July 15th and in LA on the 20th. Go to eventbrite.com and look for these two events, Wise Traditions for Wee Ones in San Diego and Simple and Fearless Healthy Living in LA. I can't wait to meet you in person and to record some live episodes with you. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hey, and finally, a big thank you to my friends at Podcast Village. You all are awesome. You are a team that helped me put out a decent show week after week, and I appreciate you. Visit their website at podcastvillage.com for information on all the ways they can support you on your podcasting journey.
Have you been enjoying these podcasts? Have you benefited from them or from the resources on the website or local chapter meetings? If so, please become a member of the Weston A. Price Foundation. It's only $25 for students and seniors and $40 for a general membership. Your contribution is critical for the continued work of the foundation. Wise Traditions is brought to you by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. The content of this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for medical advice.